that the meatpacking facilities in America were dirty. Jane Addams's criticism of child labor illustrates a desire of middle-class women to get children out of the factory and into public schools. W.E.B. Du Bois' The Crisis illustrates or suggests the frustration among African Americans at their civil liberties not being enforced. That's all you need to do. Doc I. What does the document reveal, suggest, infer, prove, illustrate, demonstrate as supplement to what you already would have written? Okay? Thus endeth the lesson. And please do it in active voice. Active voice. The subject, the verb. Always be mindful in your sentence. Who is doing what? Is it Roosevelt? Is it Congress? Is it the American people? Is it muckrakers? Is it Jane Addams? Whoever. Who is the subject? What are they doing is the verb. As long as you keep in mind in every sentence that you need to have a subject and a verb in active voice. Somebody did something in the past tense, your sentences will be better. I just did grammar, I just did tense, I just did sentence diagramming with you, rudimentary sentence diagramming. I could go off on a whole lesson on sentence diagramming. But there you go.
That was more than I've learned in AP Lang all year. I'm sorry.
Okay?
Can we clone you for the English department?
Well. All right. So, let's get into the New Deal, shall we? Now, when you walked in, you picked up an assignment, okay? The question is, and this was the 2003 DBQ, did the New Deal solve the Depression? That's essentially what the 2003 DBQ was. Did the New Deal solve the Depression? In order to ascertain an answer to that, you would need to look at the programs that were enacted in the New Deal, the alphabet soup. So what I've provided you with are the Big Ten. The Big Ten alphabet soup programs. There are a ton of alphabet soup programs. These are the 10 I have seen on AP exams, and they're the 10 that best allow you to prove or disprove that the New Deal solved the Depression. So, how do you approach a question like that? A very simple question. You look at the program, you look at the problem that it addressed, and you make a determination. Did this program solve that problem? And you add up. You know, were there more problems solved than not solved? Well, then there you go. There's your answer. Were there more problems not solved than solved? There you have an answer. But that's how you approach it. And it provides you with 10 specific things, which is really good. That's 7 more than you would see on any essay. Okay? All right, and then you need to figure out what the documents reveal or suggest or infer or demonstrate or illustrate as supplement to what you already know. All right, peeps. We did the first 100 days, correct? Why was the first 100 days so important for Roosevelt's administration? Yes, Jordan. 15 pieces of legislation enacted in the first 100 days. That is definitely an impressive accomplishment. What else was important about the first 100 days?
The fireside chats and familiarity with the president.
Well, what do the fireside chats do? Restoring confidence. Restoring confidence in government. Restoring confidence in economics. Restoring confidence in the presidency. Sure. Making it appear, at least, that the government was working on your behalf. The fireside chats do that. 15 pieces of legislation show that the government is doing something. Okay? And as you recall, in the first 100 days, okay, relief, recovery, and reform were the watchwords. Providing relief. What does it mean to provide relief? To what? Sure, give them things they don't have. You need things? Crap. Oh, no, my money's gone. I don't have money. You need things? Here you go. Here are things. Relief. What does recovery mean? What does it mean to recover?
Well, in this case, get the banks running again.
Get the banks back up on their feet. Get people back up on their feet. Get factories back up on their feet. That's what recovery means. We need to get them back to doing what they do. And then reform. What does reform mean? Changing it so it doesn't happen again. The fancy word would be fix. Okay? Fix stuff. Help people, get them back on their feet, and fix the institutions so that this problem does not happen again. Now that may mean you spend a lot of money. That's deficit spending. Keynesian economics, pump priming the economy. You need to know that the government is going to spend more money than it has in order to get the economic engines going. Think of pump priming a lawnmower. Eleanor Roosevelt and the other brain trust experts around Franklin Roosevelt, they're coming up with ideas. Eleanor Roosevelt going out to the American people to find out if these things are working. The fireside chats. Roosevelt communicating directly to the American people about what the government is doing and doing it in simplistic terms that everybody can understand. And then the alphabet soup, all these government agencies. I talked about the fact that there is a first New Deal, and when a lot of that first New Deal stuff is declared unconstitutional, there's a second New Deal. So be aware that there are two New Deals because the Supreme Court declares a lot of the first New Deal unconstitutional. And the first priority of Roosevelt in the first 100 days, guys, not just the first 100 days, the first day. The first day, inauguration is over with. Roosevelt goes to the Oval Office and immediately declares a bank holiday, shuts the banks down, only allows banks to reopen that have been checked out by the federal government. The bank holiday lasts about 3 or 4 days. Think about it. How many banks do you think the federal government can get to in 3 to 4 days? Bing. Zero. None. Nada. Yeah, sure, they stress test a number of larger institutions, but they're not going to be able to get to every bank. It's psychological. Yes.
When the banks reopen, the people are like, oh, this was okayed.
Exactly. When the banks reopen, the people say, the government says it's okay. And guys, this was a time when people believed what the government told them. It's psychological. Because once you start putting money in banks, the banks now have money to loan out. And when people have money to loan out, when banks have money to loan out, people borrow money, they buy houses, they buy cars, they buy this, they expand their business, they hire more people. That's the idea behind the bank holiday. The Glass-Steagall Act, which I talked about last time, I'll bring it up again. The Glass-Steagall Act, building a wall between investment banks that risk your money and savings banks that give out loans for cars and mortgages and where you put your savings in the safety deposit box. There is a distinction, a line between those two. That's what Glass-Steagall does. And if you happen to lose your money in an institution that goes bankrupt, your savings are guaranteed up to a certain amount. But your savings are guaranteed. You will get that money back. So if you know that you can put your money in a bank without fear of losing it, what has the government done? Given you confidence. And that's the goal here. Confidence in banking. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Think of them as the stock market police. Their job, monitor the stock market for any illegal activity. If there is illegal activity, insider trading, fraud, abuse, the SEC is empowered by the government to go after the perpetrators who are corrupting the stock market. People need to feel confident that the stock market is honest and above board. That is the goal of the SEC. Homeowners Loan Corporation helps with stabilizing mortgages. So confidence in banks and stocks is restored, mortgages are stabilized, homeowners are relieved, housing market recovers, and the stock market and banks are not only reformed, they are also regulated by the federal government. Some would argue regulated too much, which is why Glass-Steagall was repealed in 2003. I realize this is stuff we've gone over, but you're not experts in it, so. All right, next. Okay, now, as we go through these next slides, you're going to notice that there's a divide. On the left side, first New Deal. Second side, second New Deal. This is 1935, this is 1933. Okay? Yes? The first AAA. The first AA, it's your choice. The first AAA, all right, provides agricultural subsidies to farmers, something that farmers have been wanting, paying farmers not to grow crops in order to drive the price of crops up, and setting the price for agricultural goods. The president says that a bushel of potatoes goes for this, a bushel of wheat goes for that, a bushel of corn goes for that. The Supreme Court comes along in 1934, and I believe it's called Butler versus the United States, and declares that that is unconstitutional. The executive branch does not have the right or the authority to tell farmers and the public what the price for agricultural goods are. So, Roosevelt responds in the second New Deal with a revised AAA that provides subsidies to farmers without the price fixing. So farmers do get relief, ultimately. Ultimately, farmers get relief. It just takes a little bit of doing and to get around the Supreme Court. How do you provide relief to the unemployed? I think this is where we kind of wound up last time. Okay? How do you provide relief to the unemployed? People without jobs, people with no money. You said something, when I said relief, you said give money to people. Whoever said that couldn't be more right. They literally gave money to people. Like they walked around and gave money to people. Can you imagine that today? It was called the FERA, the Federal Emergency Relief Act. And what it did was it provided what are called block grants. to states, depending on the population. The government gave literally pallets of money to states for them to disperse as they saw fit. So the states would take up providing the relief because the governor of Maryland and the state legislature of Maryland know best where the problems are. The governor of New Jersey knows best where New Jersey's problems are. However, if you've got a state run by a political machine and there's a big pallet of money sitting in a warehouse,
It's not going anywhere.
yeah, it's not going anywhere. That's going in the pockets of politicians. And it did. And that was one of the criticisms leveled at Roosevelt, was that it was leading to corruption, especially among Democratic governors. Roosevelt's a Democrat. You had a lot of Democratic governors who were using that money for their own ends. CWA, PWA. These are temporary make-work projects. I believe I gave you the word boondoggle. Made up jobs, phony jobs. Hey, you guys, rake leaves. You guys, pick up trash. We'll pay you for that. My favorite one is the ditch. I love the ditch. You guys, tomorrow come on over here, we need to dig a ditch. You guys show up 2 days later, we're going to fill in the ditch. Making up work. But what does making up work do?
It makes people feel like they're working.
Exactly. It makes them feel worth something. It's psychological again. The CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. The word conservation is in there. When you think conservation, what do you think of? Parks. Exactly. And that's what the CCC does. They put young men to work in campsites and national parks, making hiking trails, making cabins, making recreational areas and whatnot. It gives young men who were ordinarily unemployed and unemployable something to do. And that was important because young men with nothing to do, you're asking for trouble. I walk around these halls all the time and I see young men with nothing to do. And their trouble just waiting to happen. Now, during the second New Deal, the WPA expands the idea of government make-work projects in order to get into areas that previously weren't addressed in these. So, for instance, authors are given jobs. Write books. The government will pay you to write books. The government will pay you to put on shows. Now, we need those shows to be patriotic and celebratory of what we're doing here in the government. And you had a bunch of New Deal WPA theater projects that celebrated Roosevelt and the New Deal and what the government was doing. Music. The government would pay composers to write pieces that were celebratory of America. Anybody ever hear of Aaron Copland? Fanfare for the Common Man? Federal Music Project. Why are we writing a song called Fanfare for the Common Man? Slave narrative projects. They hire historians with nothing to do. Hey, you know what? I'll bet you there are some people around the country who were slaves in 1860. Now, granted, they were in their late 80s, and they were children at the time. But you had historians go around and interview these former slaves about their experience and what they remember. They put it all on tape, And you can access that through the Library of Congress. It's online. You can access those slave narratives and listen to interviews with people who were slaves, which is pretty impressive. Nursery schools, research and education, grants, science was a big deal. WPA put scientists to work, researchers, archaeologists, whatever. But it was all funded by the government. And then the NYA, which is kind of an offshoot of the WPA, targeted in particular inner city youth, and in more particular, inner city blacks, who seem to be having a tougher go of it. And so the New Deal is going to try to help them out as well. Wow, the federal government stepping in and helping African Americans. When was the last time that happened? Honestly, when was the last time that happened?
Civil War.
Civil War! Reconstruction! I think the last time you had a Civil Rights Act was 1875. So here's Franklin Roosevelt and the Democrats. The Democrats helping out African Americans, helping out the poor, helping out the educated elites, helping out the unemployed, helping out people, blue collar workers. Here's just some examples of WPA work. The Theater Project, the Writers Project, classes that you could take, social studies, homemaking, business, music, language, science, arts. Anybody recognize this picture?
Yeah.
Okay, do you know what it's called?
Something happened with Migrant Marvel.
Yes, it's called Migrant Mother. And it's by a photographer named Dorothea Lange. She was a member of the WPA as a photographer. Her job was to go around and chronicle for posterity the effects of the Depression and the Dust Bowl on Americans. This is her most famous photograph. What does this photograph reveal or illustrate or demonstrate to you?
Life is pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. Misery, tough, hard life. Do you know how old this woman is? How old does she look?
Like 40.
She's 28. It's not, yeah, it's not the age, it's the mileage. Yeah, she's had a tough life. She's got 1, 2, 3 kids here that she's taking care of. Now, where's the propaganda here? Where's the message? Why is this important for the Roosevelt administration to get out? What? Hoover, we're 4 years removed from Hoover here. We're not concerned with Hoover. Hoover's in retirement. Yeah. Trying to gain support for the AAA, trying to gain support for the New Deal in general. My friends, this picture is posed. They took several takes on this picture before they got it right. That distant look of an unknowing future, that concern for what's to come, that's imbued in here. Yeah, that's all posed. How about labor unions? Oh, actually, businesses. Hold on, sorry. Recovery projects. The linchpin to Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, the thing that he thought was going to be the big solution to all of our problems, let's call it the Obamacare of Franklin Roosevelt's administration, is the NIRA, National Industrial Recovery Act. It establishes an agency called the NRA, not the gun guys, the National Recovery Administration. Roosevelt wants the government to partner with business. The government and business work together to establish fair prices, fair wages, fair hours, what they called fair codes of competition. Yes?
Working out loud, is that prices?
How smart of you. Like I said, this is the big program that Franklin Roosevelt is hanging his entire first term on. He even, in Section 7A of the NIRA, Section 7A of the Act, allows labor unions the right to collectively bargain. This is the holy grail for labor unions. This is the thing that they've always wanted. The ability to fairly sit down and negotiate their salary and benefits. That is given in this act. And in 1935, it is struck down by the Supreme Court. The case is called Schechter Poultry versus United States, and it is actually a Supreme Court case you need to know. Because it invalidates the big act of the New Deal. See, the idea was that if you belonged to the National Recovery Administration, you advertised it in your window to let people know that you were working with the government to create fair prices, fair wages, and fair hours. That this business was not going to take advantage of you, that you were working on behalf of the American people in conjunction with the government. You would put this poster in your window. It was a blue eagle with red letters NRA on it, and that would let people know that you were on board with the New Deal and this program. Schechter Poultry versus U.S. is sometimes referred to as the sick chicken case. Because in setting fair prices, the federal government decided to tell Schechter Poultry of New York what the price of healthy chicken was versus a sick chicken. The point being that the government couldn't tell Schechter Poultry what the price of any chicken was. Because the government was trying to tell Schechter Poultry you can't charge as much for a sick chicken as you can for a healthy chicken. Well, Schechter Poultry said, well, screw this, we're going to the Supreme Court. You can't tell us what price to charge for any chicken. And the Supreme Court agreed. The NIRA is declared unconstitutional. The NRA is disbanded. Section 7A, gone. The big thing that Roosevelt wanted to do in his first term is overturned by the Supreme Court. Even Obama can't say that about Obamacare. That was supported by the Supreme Court. Now, some other things that the Roosevelt administration did do to help regions recover: the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority creates a network of hydroelectric dams along the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers in order to provide electrical power to at least 9 southern states. Where do you think Roosevelt got the idea to build hydroelectric dams? Hoover. Where Hoover was only willing to build 2 or 3, Roosevelt built tons of hydroelectric dams, made work for people throughout the South, throughout the rural South, and brought modernity to a region that up until the 1930s was really the backwards area of the United States. And when this worked so well in the first New Deal, in the second New Deal, Roosevelt says, we're going to take that idea and we're going to take it to Appalachia. We're going to take it to West Virginia, Kentucky, Western North Carolina, Western Virginia, Eastern Tennessee. And we're going to bring electricity and modern infrastructure to the poorest region of this country in order to bring them into the 20th century as well. This provides jobs, it provides opportunity, it provides modernity, it provides support, it provides relief to an entire region of the country. Just so happens to be the region that votes solidly Democratic at the time. And yeah, you got to spend some money, man. That ain't cheap. But it provides, it's an investment. Guys, sometimes you have to invest $1 in order to make $5. Sometimes you have to spend money. You got to spend money to make money. Labor unions very upset by the Schechter poultry case. However, let's see, Section 7A of the NIRA, collective bargaining, okay, but that was declared unconstitutional. In 1932, the federal government outlawed the use of injunctions to break up strikes. It's called the Norris-LaGuardia Act. But it's really in the second New Deal that you see labor unions getting the benefits that they had so long fought for. Franklin Roosevelt is their white knight. And it's why labor unions have voted Democratic since the early 20th century. At one time, 35% of the workforce belonged to labor unions. At the height of labor unions' power in America, 35% of all workers belonged to labor unions. That was in the 1930s and 40s. Today, 8%. And what's happened to wages, my friends? They've gone down. What's happened to benefits? They've been cut. The Wagner Act, named after New York Senator Robert Wagner, creates the National Labor Relations Board. This is an entire government agency devoted to making sure that labor sits down with business and hashes out their differences. Like Teddy Roosevelt did by negotiating an end to the anthracite coal strike. You've now got an entire agency that is their job, is to negotiate on behalf of labor and business. And then the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, you get for the first time a minimum wage and an 8-hour workday and an end to child labor. unions feeling so emboldened at the end of the New Deal start to develop bigger organizations. For instance, the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, that had been formed in the late 19th century. Skilled workers only were allowed to belong. Only skilled workers, trained workers, workers who were invested in the success of the business. They join with another organization called the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The CIO were the unskilled workers. And in particular, it was run by John Lewis of the United Mine Workers, but the AFL, CIO, is still around today. It's the largest labor union in the country. It's a mixture of skilled workers and unskilled workers, and it makes up a number of different industries. Maybe you hear of like the Auto Workers Local 987 or the Pipe Fitters Local 521. They're talking about elements of the AFL-CIO and local chapters. But it's a huge organization. Yeah.
The Fair Labor Standards Act.
Yeah.
Was the CCC considered child labor?
No, because you had to be 17 years or older to do it. It was for kids 17 to 25. Men, 17 to 25. Men. That was it. Men. Young boys. So, guys, let's just take a brain break real quick. So far, who has benefited from the New Deal? Labor unions. Who's benefited? The rural poor, particularly where? In the South. Who else has benefited? African Americans have benefited, absolutely. Programs for them, yeah. Men! Men! Yeah. Farmers! Yeah. The unemployed. And, you know, they may not have thought it, but businesses have benefited. They may think that the federal government's trying to ride their backs here with all these regulations and stuff, but you know what? They're doing business, which is better than not doing business. Hey, another group that benefits, the elderly. The Social Security Administration is established in 1935 so that people of old age can collect a guaranteed pension. There was a great deal of criticism leveled toward Franklin Roosevelt that he wasn't doing anything for old people. So Roosevelt responds. He says, all right, fine, here you go. There's a program for old people. We'll have the young people pay into a system that provides pensions to old people, and when those young people reach old age, the younger folks will be paying for them. And so you can collect an old age pension after age 65. Here's the problem. What was life expectancy in 1935? 63. But since the 1970s, what's life expectancy today? Like 80.
For women.
For women, it's more.
Yeah. I didn't even think guys was 80. I thought it was like
Yeah, guys are 80. I think women are like 82. Anybody see a problem?
Texas worked 15 years.
Yeah, you're collecting Social Security on average for 15 years when you were only supposed to collect it for maybe, if you got it, 1, 2, 3 years. And when the baby boomers who were born after World War II, they're now retiring, the population behind them is not as high as the not as numerous. It's not like hey man, what's going on? The population is not as numerous among the young people as the old people. There aren't enough people to pay into Social Security to make it viable. Social Security, unless it is fixed, will go bankrupt in 2041. Just in time for me to retire. USA! USA! African Americans. Franklin Roosevelt addresses African Americans in a way that no president has done, I would argue, since Grant went after the KKK in 1870. Not only, but let's not go thinking that Franklin Roosevelt's getting all chummy with black people here. That ain't happening, okay? He understands that he needs the South to get reelected. He gets that. But he gives blacks a seat at the table. He's got black advisors working in the White House. A. Philip Randolph is a labor leader. Mary McLeod Bethune is an educational advocate. Depicted here. She's like Grand. Don't mess with her. Don't mess with Grand. He creates a federal council on Negro affairs. I know it's such an anachronistic term. Eleanor Roosevelt pushes Franklin to embrace civil rights. This is a picture of Eleanor Roosevelt with Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson was an opera singer who was scheduled to sing for the Daughters of the American Revolution down in Washington, D.C. When the DAR canceled her concert because she was black, Eleanor Roosevelt created a concert for her on the Mall at the Lincoln Memorial. It's why the Lincoln Memorial has become kind of a place where civil rights activists gather. But FDR, he didn't want to be seen as doing too much for blacks, lest he cheese off the Southern whites that he needed to get reelected. So the TVA, for instance, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the work camps to build those dams were segregated. He didn't embrace anti-lynching legislation. It took Harry Truman to do that. But he provided jobs for urban youth. He provided opportunity through the WPA. And in 1941, after A. Philip Randolph threatened to have a march on Washington to protest it, Roosevelt created the Fair Employment Practices Commission to guarantee that there was not workplace discrimination in federal offices. Of course, it took the threat of a march on Washington on the eve of World War II to do that. By the way, this guy, A. Philip Randolph, does not get enough props. He is the Martin Luther King. I know that's really stupid to do, but Frederick Douglass was the Martin Luther King during the Civil War. Booker T. Washington was the Martin Luther King during the late 19th century. W.E.B. Du Bois, the Martin Luther King in the early 20th century. Actually, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois battled it. But A. Philip Randolph is the Martin Luther King during the 30s and the 40s. He's the guy promoting civil rights. He's the guy that's out in front of it. And he's instrumental in forming a group after the Civil War. Anybody ever hear of CORE? Oh my God. Congress of Racial Equality. It's the first civil rights organization devoted to ending segregation. Boom. Anybody ever hear of the Freedom Riders? Freedom Summers? Yeah, it was. Anybody ever hear of the sit-ins?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was organized by CORE. But not everybody liked Franklin Roosevelt. said Roosevelt wasn't doing enough. The New Deal didn't go far enough. Huey Long, what he wanted to do was something called share the wealth. He said there needs to be a cap on the amount of money that millionaires can make. Anything above that cap, the government takes and redistributes to the American people in the form of a guaranteed yearly salary of $3,000. Long wanted to make it so that every American family had a base $3,000 a year salary by taking money from the millionaires and dispensing it to the American people. It is communism. Let's not joke about it. It is communism. And look, when Roosevelt was getting ready to run for re-election in 1936, he wasn't concerned about the Republicans. The Republicans were dead. They were saddled with the Herbert Hoover. What do you want to return to Herbert Hoover? Yeah, I mean, that campaign wrote itself. Roosevelt thought this was the biggest threat. Yeah. This is what kept Roosevelt up at night in 1935 and 36. Huey Long. And the problem, anybody know what happened to Huey Long? Yes, he was shot by a Tommy gun. Wait. Yeah, he was assassinated in the lobby of the Louisiana State Legislature. Yeah. Make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. He was assassinated by a disgruntled doctor.
With Tommy gun, yeah.
With a Tommy gun. You also had a guy named Father Charles Coughlin. He was called the radio priest. He's the Rush Limbaugh of his day. He called Roosevelt a socialist. He called him a dictator. He called him a Kenyan. No, wrong guy. He called him going too far. But it's the same, tired old argument. He said that Roosevelt was creating a welfare state. If Charles Coughlin were alive today, he'd be one of the 5 on Fox and Friends. He'd be sitting there with Steve Doocy and the guy who's not Steve Doocy. And then you had Francis Townsend arguing for the need for old age pensions. That is addressed, by the way, he's a doctor. That was addressed through the Social Security Administration.
He owned a Tommy gun.
Huh? He did not own a Tommy gun. He was just an old man who wanted help for old people. And then the American Liberty League. The American Liberty League, these were conservatives who were wary that the government was too involved in government planning and taxing and spending. They saw the New Deal as a threat to the Constitution. What is this? The Trojan horse. That the New Deal was going to destroy America. Whatever, it's a donkey, yes, because it's the Democrats.
Yeah.
Exactly. But guys, and Huey Long dead, but despite the fact that you've got all of this opposition, plus a Republican nominee named, I kid you not, Alf Landon. Nobody named Alf gets elected president.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got me.
Yeah. Now,
Come on.
you. Come on, Vermont. What are you waiting on here? Guys. Now, keep in mind, folks, that Vermont today actually has a senator who is an avowed socialist. His name is Bernie Sanders. He is a socialist. I kid you not. Today. Maine? Yeah, I don't know. It's cold. People are frosty in their brain. Okay, guys, if you are Franklin Roosevelt and you get elected by that margin, I can do whatever I do what I want. So Roosevelt says, obviously, the American people like the cut of my jib. So I'm going to start to stick it to the people who've been sticking it to me. And in 1937, after 11 of the 15 first New Deal laws were declared unconstitutional, including the NIRA, which really stuck in Franklin Roosevelt's craw, which wasn't difficult because he was in a wheelchair. But he decides he is going to reform the Supreme Court. He is going to alter the Supreme Court. The executive branch is going to unilaterally remake the judicial branch. What's the look on your face for? He what? No! You can't! You can't! This is a violation of the fundamental principles of this country. It's a violation of checks and balances. Roosevelt, it becomes known as the court packing plan, and this was the thing. Roosevelt said, you know, all those 9 justices up there, 6 of them are 70 years old or older. So for every justice over the age of 70, I'm going to create a helper justice to give them the ability to make wise decisions. And I'll name those helper justices. It would have gone from 9 to 15 members of the Supreme Court, all named by Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt just wanted a rubber stamp for the New Deal. Guys, you don't need to be a genius to realize that Roosevelt is almost assuming dictatorial power here by doing this. That was the concern. I love it. It shows him walking. I love that it shows him walking. It should be a ramp. Yeah. All right, so anyway, because of the court packing scheme, public support for the New Deal vanishes. It's gone. Congress cuts funding for the New Deal, and as soon as Congress cuts funding on the New Deal, guess what? The economy goes back into recession. In 1938, Congress passes the last of the New Deal legislation. Franklin Roosevelt can't get any more legislation passed through Congress. In 1938, the Republicans actually made gains in Congress. The Republicans who had been dead and buried, thanks to Herbert Hoover and Alf Landon, they're back, baby! They're back because the American people do not like it when their president assumes unilateral powers. They want checks. The legacy of the New Deal is that you have created a new Democratic majority that governs this country for at least 20 to 40 years. You've created what's called the New Deal Coalition, and it's basically everybody who's benefited from the New Deal. Poor, the educated, the farmers, the laborers, Southerners, blacks. I love the fact that blacks and Southerners are part of the same party. And women. And Roosevelt is able to hold these people together.
Good morning, Southern High School. Your morning announcements will be on.
But take a look at these charts. Does the New Deal solve the Depression? Here's the funding cut in New Deal programs, and look what happens to unemployment. Gosh darn. GNP, gross national product. By 1939, it's only back up to $85 billion. Consumerism. How much are people spending? Not as much as in 1928. So, what did the New Deal do?
Provided work for a lot of people. Dropped
But did it solve the Depression?
It resolved making people to believe that the depression could be solved.
Yes.
So they kind of thought it was.
But ultimately, it creates the illusion of solving it. As soon as those New Deal supports are taken away, the economy slumps.
Please stand for your pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Southern High School. Smokeless tobacco, known as dip, snuff, or chew, is not a safe alternative to smoking.
The New Deal draws attention to the rural poor. It stabilizes banking and the stock market for the next 80 years. It creates a template for welfare state programs that you guys saw on that chart I gave you that showed the fair deal and the new frontier and the great society. It restores confidence in most institutions. It creates a democratic governing coalition that lasts until the 1970s. And really, the final nail in the New Deal coalition is the election of Ronald Reagan.
Just tell them that you're from Southern.
And it defines politics and attitudes toward government for a generation.
People members sign up outside of C201 to get service credit as a tutor in social studies classes during Bulldog Block.
Hey. All right.
Don't forget, tonight is
in my
Coffee House.
announcement.
It starts
All right.
at 6.
It
only
defines
$5
political
per month.
attitudes
Bring your
toward
friends and
government for a
family.
generation.
Thank you.
Guys,
That's all for your announcements. Have a nice day.
Between 1932 and 1980, people believed that the government could be used for good, to benefit people. When Ronald Reagan comes along in 1980 and says, the scariest words you can ever hear are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, that struck a chord. And you see a sea change, a shift in the attitudes of the American people. From 1980, I would argue till today, people believe that the government is a hindrance. People believe that the government gets in the way, that the government screws things up. Look no further than the Obamacare website rollout. I mean, you had 3 years to get a website up and running, and it wasn't running. All that does is undergird the argument that the government is too big, too bloated, and unresponsive to the needs of average Americans. So, 32 to 80, government can work for you. 80 to the present, not so much. Enjoy your weekend.